Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Russ Townsend, for uh, being with us today. I think it's been incredible that you have interviewed everybody, and now it's your turn. You know?
Yeah, it's been a really cool experience being able to talk to everybody one on one, specifically about the project. So I'm actually pretty excited to be on the other side today.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's start it. Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Who's Russ Thompson?
Yeah, exactly. Great question. So, gosh, I could run through the standard stuff, right? So I've been in the Army, gosh, right out of high school. I joined up in 1991. So I'm approaching my 31st year of
Wow.
military service. But I always kind of couch that phrase like, yeah, I've been in the Army for 31 years, but it's part-time service, right? It's the reserves. So I only have like maybe, I don't know, 13, 12, 13, 14 years ish of actual like credited time, in the sense that mobilizations and everything, when you pile it all together, it's only like 12 or 13 years of service. It took me a little over 30 years to get there. Um, but it's been an interesting journey, 13 years enlisted. I turned down promotion to master sergeant so I can become a second lieutenant. People thought I was crazy,
No,
but the career continues, and I've been
correct.
relatively successful. Excuse me. Um, and on the civilian side, I've had a variety of occupations over the years, depending on when I was in college, working in Arizona, different stints of mobilization where I would do full-time military service. But since 2004, I've been working for a rather large contracting firm out of the Tampa area, which has proven to be a really interesting and fun time because I've got to work for great clients at CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, and U.S. Special Operations Command. So no regrets.
Awesome. Yeah, you gave us kind of like a macro, but I'm gonna go down a little bit. Oh, how many kids you have? You
Hmm.
marry? I know for a fact. Please pass our thanks for your service to your son, because that's pretty cool that your son is a service member as well.
Yeah, my son is at least the third generation Army in my
Cool.
family, and he's actually down at Fort Huachuca right now in school.
He's an
Um,
Intel guy too.
yeah. He's doing really well. And our daughter, my wife and I, we have a daughter who just graduated from high school, so we're pretty excited about that as she gets ready to go off to college and become a great American, just like the rest of us.
Oh wow! So you soon gonna be empty nested. That's pretty cool.
Semi-empty. She's gonna stay home while she goes to school, and just kind of ease her way into that. I mean, she'll stay at home until she gets tired of the rules, right? And that's how you're an adult. When you're tired of living under somebody else's rules and you want to create your own life, that's when it's time to move.
That's kind of unique because actually, my daughter just opened up to my wife and said she would have done it better. She would have eased it up like the way you're talking about. She would have stayed like at
Yeah.
least go to college, but at least stay you know commute back and forth so until she felt like okay, got it, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, transitions are a challenge. I mean, we look at military transition all the time, right? Guys going from active service and into the normal world or the real world after the military. But transitions are big anytime you have a major change in your life. And going from a high school environment where you probably have a class size of 30 or less into a college environment where you can have a class size of 200, that's a big change. And I don't know that we do a really good job culturally or socially of getting kids actually ready for that kind of transition from a very controlled home environment to a very uncontrolled collegiate environment. And I think like any other transition, it comes with its own challenges. So the more deliberate you can make that switch, I think the better off you are.
Yeah, I agree actually, and I think also in my view, we underappreciate, at least in the army, when you PCS, they actually help you a lot to move. It's not like figure out, do it yourself. And you don't realize it until you out of the army and you're like, okay, now it's me. I can
Yeah.
call in, and transportation is going to help me, and all they need is my
Right.
order.
There's no checklist in the real world.
Correct, correct. And and also it could be for students. It could be a bit lonely because they're used to they got to create their routine now. They
Yep.
got to create. They got to make new friends and everything. And some people it's a bit challenging. I understand.
Yep. Agreed.
Hey, so I didn't know you were a historian. Again, I'm like learning all this about you. We got a lot of commonality, which is weird. As you, I was a Intel guy. I was a 35 or 350
Yep.
Zulu.
Yeah.
You were all sort. Now you're a historian. I like history a lot. Actually, after getting old is when I really start appreciating.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to study history?
So that's a really interesting backstory. So, excuse me. I went to Arizona State University for college. Excuse me. I went to community college first.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
that.
so that's why I'm a big fan of that ease of transition into a large university environment, because it worked really well for me. So I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to go to college for. And I was in my mid-20s when I started going to college, but I had this idea that I wanted to teach because I really enjoyed training new soldiers when I was an NCO. So I thought, well, the closest thing I could do to replicate that in the non-military environment would be a high school teacher. So I wanted to teach something that I felt was interesting to me, because I then figured that my enthusiasm would translate into a better teaching experience and education experience for the students. And I had had several history teachers over the years, even in college, that I would sit in a history class and I was really interested in the content, but then the way the content's presented is not exciting. It's not interesting. And I'm like, gosh, I really thought I wanted to learn more about Eastern European history, and this is really not fun.
It's
Uh,
boring, right?
and right. But there's different ways of teaching history. And that was one thing that I really wanted to do, because I feel like history is important because there's so many things that we don't retain from our history. Like we look at historical events and we're like, hey, this thing happened and this person was involved, and that's a really interesting or important event. But we don't understand why that was an important event in so many cases. We just know that, hey, this thing happened in this place and that's really neat. Like, but what makes it important? And there's very little context given in modern history lessons. I think it's a lot of, hey, memorize these people's names, memorize these dates, memorize these key locations, but why they're important, I think, gets lost. And that's not to say that, there's history teachers all over the world are going to watch this and they're going to be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just speaking from a personal experience that that context means a lot to me, and understanding the importance and value of things is one thing, but understanding them in a proper context is a different thing altogether.
That's very interesting, and I'll give you my thoughts. And it could be controversial, it can be not, but I take it for take it for what it is. As us, we tend to live more overseas most of the time than the U.S. So U.S. culture for us, although we're citizen, it might be a little bit foreign to what we used to. Living 24/7 in the U.S. versus living overseas around the
Mhm.
world. So what I have discovered when I get back after retire, after 20 years being overseas, is a lot of people don't know our own history, which is amazing to me. And like what you're talking about, context and everything,
Yep.
and why things came to be the way it is, regardless if you like it or not. This is not
Hmm.
about, it's about stuff happened and that was the way it is, and the consequence or the result of where we are right now is based on on that stuff. So I find it very interesting. My second point is that, and I think he talks about context, is my kids, two of my kids graduated with IB out of high school,
Hmm.
which is very heavy, and not only in history but a war history. They took it by places, which allowed them to see some of the stuff more in a broader space. So I thought history is pretty cool. Now that I'm old, I see it.
They say the more that you live through history, the more you start to appreciate it. So as you get older, you have more contextual background for the things that happened during your life. So like I was born at the end of the Vietnam conflict. So I didn't really have that personal experience, but I learned about it through my father, right, who had that experience, and through people around my family that had that experience. But then you grow up, you're alive in the 80s, right? So you get to see things happen in the 80s and then through the 90s, and you get to, okay, so I was alive during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And I remember how those events happened from my perspective. And then when you go back and you do research later,
It's
it
totally
makes a lot more
different.
sense.
Yeah.
Like you really understand it better. And then the more that people do this, I think the more that they're alive and the more that they can remember historical events. And then when they re-expose to those events in a historical context, it resonates more. It
No, I
brings a
agree.
lot more to it, makes it, because you were there
Yeah.
in a sense.
Well, I think you have a more deep understanding while the decisions were made and
Yeah.
why they were made in a way. You can again agree or disagree, but however,
Right.
it's
Because
really
history is
important.
not there, right? It's not there to oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Justify or
History, in my personal opinion, history is not there to be evaluated as right or wrong. It's there to be what it is. And you should take it as being, true, because it's hard to argue with the facts. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's open to interpretation in a modern context. And I think that's where people kind of get caught up about historical events, is they want to use a modern contextual understanding of what right and wrong is, and then apply it to something that happened, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and then place a value judgment on it using, 2022 cultural and social norms for something that happened in the 17th century. It just doesn't make sense. You have to go a little bit deeper and think a little bit more about, the rationale, the logic, the decisions that were made, why they were made, to understand why something was significant. And it doesn't match very well with as society evolves. So you get people that want to have a revisionist perspective on things, which can create a lot of challenges with historians, because like the history is what it is, man.
and
It's hard
sometimes
to
history
argue.
was ugly too. Sometimes
Very sure.
you know what I say. History was very ugly during those time, and
Right. History of conflict. I mean, my
yeah,
gosh, how much, like you were talking about the IB program based on conflict, but those are like some of the most significant events in the world history has been conflict. And it's it's why the map looks the way it does today. It's why
indeed, that's a lot of people don't
states
know that.
get
Yeah.
right. Like there's a definitive difference in cultural ideas in different parts of the world, and we have fought over them over the last several hundred years. And I don't know that that's going to stop. So that's one constant in world history, is conflict.
Well, Ukraine, look at that now.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
You know, it's
But we could
incredible.
talk all day
I
about
know, I
history, right?
know. Let's go. Again, something that came to my surprise. You're an MI guy like me. So, what drive you to be an MI soldier? I know you were an enlisted.
Right,
I'm
right.
serious because
So
I got to the MI by I wasn't looking to be an MI. I just
yeah, yeah.
I saw a job and I said, man, I like that job, and that job
Yeah.
happened to
So
be MI for me.
so this is going to be, when I look back at it and I think about, 30 some odd years of service, and I'm not sure when I'm going to retire. So it's going to be well over 31. I'm pretty sure of that. Um, but it's interesting on reflection, and this is kind of, the historian in me, as I look back at things that happened along my career, and certain events lead to other events, which cumulatively creates this chain of progress through a military career. So, and this is funny to me. Well, I'm interested to see if you find it humorous as well. So I went in the Army in 1991, as I mentioned earlier, and I spent almost 6 years with the 2nd Ranger Battalion up at Fort Lewis, Washington. I was an infantryman. I was an Airborne Ranger infantry guy. I carried a machine gun for a while.
Oh,
I was a team leader. I spent a little bit of time working at the squad level. And then I decided I wanted to go to college. So I got out after nearly 6 years enlisted. and was interested in transitioning into the reserves while I was in college. So I went to the reserve recruiter on Fort Lewis, and she looked at my records and she looked at where I was going, which was Phoenix, Arizona. And she says, okay, and this is how I remember it clearly. I believe I remember it clearly. She says, okay, do you want to keep your rank? Because I was an NCO. And that was my reaction. I was like, well, that's an interesting question. Of course I want to keep my rank. So, okay, all the infantry slots that we have available in Arizona are for E4s. So if you want to stay in E5, then you're going to have to consider changing your MOS.
Oh,
I said, okay, I'm not in the habit of re-earning rank that I've already gained. So let's look at these other potential jobs I could have. And she says, you can be a transportation driver, field artillery, or military intelligence. And I sat there, and at the time I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to be a truck driver. That's just not anything that I had interest in doing. I didn't really think that field artillery was going to be, this is part of my ego at the time, right? Young mid-20s Ranger. I was like, I'm not going to be field artillery either. I'm already Airborne Ranger infantry guy. I don't need to go.
And I go down again, yeah.
But
Got it.
I mean, so that left MI. And at the time, my older brother was in military intelligence, and he would tell me stories about his experiences going to the field and working in intel. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe it's the less
of three evil. The choice.
I didn't want to put it that way, but that's kind of what I was trying to think of another way of saying that maybe it's not it's the best of the worst opportunities. But it was an amazing opportunity, and I didn't know it at the time. So I went down to Phoenix, became an intelligence NCO, reclassified, became an all source guy, and having an intelligence background has it's opened up so many doors, both on the military and on my civilian career. Because if I was an intel guy when 9/11 happened and I didn't get mobilized into a job that I really enjoyed doing, then I never would have worked down at Central Command in the intel field, and I wouldn't be working at Special Operations Command today. So that one day sitting in the recruiter's office, just deciding I don't want to be an E4 again. I don't want to be a truck driver, and I don't want to be a gun bunny. I guess I'll take MI. Smartest decision for all the wrong reasons. Right?
That is funny. Actually, so you could tell that you one of the few that had a very positive experience with a recruiter, even though I have one too. You know, my recruiter was pretty
all
good.
of my personal experiences with recruiters have been positive. I know recruiters kind of get a bad reputation for maybe being less than honest or forthright with what somebody may experience in the military. But I knew I was going to go in the Army when I was in high school. It was the only thing I was really interested in doing when I was in high school. I initially thought I'd be a combat engineer because I liked architecture and building stuff. But then I sat down in the recruiter's office and I watched.
What a real combat engineer it is.
Well, he put a video in. He had the cassette tape, the VCR, threw that thing in there, and it was a Ranger demo that they have from Ranger School, with the guys rappelling and jumping out of helicopters and coming in on the boats real quiet. And I was just like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. So we changed my contract from being a combat engineer to being an Airborne Ranger, and it's been great.
Well, this is a great segue. Please tell us about your experience as an Airborne Ranger. I know the Rangers are a very close community.
Yeah.
So just tell the audience a little bit about.
So my time in the Ranger Regiment was between conflicts. So when I got to the Ranger Battalion in 1992, February of 1992, there were a lot of people still there that had been involved in Operation Just Cause in Panama. And that was when I got there, that was kind of the high water mark for the Ranger Regiment, because it proved to be highly capable in a combat environment. But then the next event, large scale event, was in Somalia. That involved one company out of 3rd Ranger Battalion. It involved multiple companies of 3rd Ranger Battalion, but the big conflict, the big Black Hawk Down day, was a company out of 3rd Ranger Battalion. So I missed that out. I mean, I watched it on TV like most everybody else. And then I left in 1997. And then the next major event, of course, was 9/11. So I was in the Ranger Battalion during a period where there wasn't a lot of conflict to get involved with. So the really cool thing about that time frame was that we spent so much time working to be prepared that in hindsight, it doesn't matter, right? Like the opportunity wasn't there when I was in battalion, but being in the Ranger Battalion and living that culture for almost 6 years of my life, really, like, that created who I am in the military today. So like the Ranger creed and the ethos that the Rangers live by, and the value that we put on integrity and discipline, and just the way that we approach tasks has served me well. Because if there's one thing that I am at this point, it's determined. It's determined to be successful. I'm not as fast as I used to be. I'm not as strong as I used to be, but my determination to get to the finish hasn't changed. So it may take me longer and I may be slower, but I'm going to get there. Or, and the community itself is amazing. So the Rangers, and I'm sure this is true with other elite organizations, is the fraternal organization, the fraternal bond continues. So I run into Rangers now that we served in different battalions, we served at different time frames, but as soon as we make that connection, it's like we've known each other for years.
That's what I noticed. No, I remember when we were in Emily Arena with one of the VetCoin,
Yep.
and all you had to say, "Oh yeah, I was a Ranger." Whoop, everything just like it was like, "Oh, okay, he was." The other
Yep.
dude is a Ranger, and all of a sudden everything was like, I don't. It's a special bond that I don't think people understand.
It's difficult, and that's shared hardship creates those bonds. So even though you can look at it as being fortunate or unfortunate to not have fought for my country when I was in the Ranger Regiment, but we worked so hard and we trained so hard that there was plenty of shared hardship across the organization. And I'm still really, really good friends with guys that I met in 1992 and 1993, and we were privates together in the Ranger Battalion, and we mopped the floors together and we shined our boots together, and we walked with all the weight on our backs, miserable, but still great friends today, 30 years later. It's and the organizations that pop up out of that, and the nonprofit community is absolutely massive and huge too, which is fantastic to see so many Rangers taking that approach to life and approach to excellence, and then transitioning that into service to beyond the military is pretty awesome.
I have to highlight because I heard you say it twice, and I think I want to tell our audience that I want to make sure they don't take it wrongly when you say, um, although you didn't fight or you didn't go to war with the Rangers, I don't think you're trying to diminish anybody's service because they didn't get to fight. So I want to highlight that because the service is, regardless if you serve, in my opinion, regardless if you serve 1 day or 3 day, if you're a National Guard or if you're a reserve, I think is an amazing sacrifice regardless. So I just, in my personal opinion, I want to highlight that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And
because one way or the other we're contributing somehow,
Right. So fast forward to last year, I was in the Command General Staff College doing my distance learning program, and I got to a lesson, and in that lesson it talks about how the Army runs. That's kind of the background for this lesson, and I learned more about the Army in that lesson than I have in the last in the 30 years prior about how much of the Army exists to keep the Army functioning. When you talk about recruiting, training, education, support services, just to keep the Army functioning is almost half the force. So yeah, critical jobs all around. Like the non-combat role is more important between conflicts than the actual combat roles. So there's nothing to diminish anybody's service ever. Like you served your country, like that's a great thing.
Indeed, sir. Indeed. Ranger lead the way. I like it. I like it.
All the way.
Oh,
You may have noticed. We got a little.
I saw it. Yeah. Yeah. You know, my old first sergeant for Lewis was a guy who was in Somalia. He was a platoon sergeant when that happened, and you know, you could tell. I mean, once you see a ranger, you could see. You know, you could spot a ranger a miles away out of its demeanor. It's like
I don't know about that.
You could spot a GI miles away too. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
You know. Hey, so let's go back real quick because we kind of brushed over. You were a correctional officer too in Arizona. That's kind of unique too, and a teacher. So please tell us a little bit about your experience as a correctional officer.
Oh my gosh!
Or what got you to be a correctional officer?
I became a corrections officer essentially because while I was in college, I started a family, and corrections officers had a lot of opportunity in Arizona at the time. They were constantly hiring, and it was at the time it looked like a really good way for me to basically get a job with benefits to support my wife and incoming children. So it was kind of one of those adult moments where I decided, like, okay, working part-time and running around school and having fun is nice, but responsibility time. So I'd stepped up a bit. So I ended up working Arizona State prison complex in Florence, maximum security.
Oh, wow.
Did that for a few years until 9/11 happened, and I got mobilized and never went back to Arizona. Never lived in Arizona after that. So the rest, as they say, is history.
And what about your experience as a teacher?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, as time works out, I never actually became a teacher. So
oh, wow. Okay.
After 9/11 happened, I was in my senior year in college, and I got mobilized before I could do my student teaching.
Okay.
So I ended up graduating while I was deployed because I had enough credits, but I never actually became a teacher because my intelligence career took over after 9/11 when the demand for intel officers went up. So yeah, so I went back, and so I never actually went back to teach.
Oh, okay.
And
you know, it's funny that now I know why you're so comfortable when in speaking.
well, I did get to work at the Joint Special Operations University for a while, and I did international education, and I did help, you know, our faculty, our other faculty members teach classes internationally, and that was a lot of fun. So I felt like I got to actually implement all those things I learned in college, but it wasn't to be a high school history teacher; it was to be an adult education, military oriented strategy and combating terrorism.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Well, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
I'm ready.
Well, we're back. Back with the MC, the official MC of VetCoin, Russ Townsend.
That's a very unofficial title, by the way.
No. So, Russ, we were talking about all your history and everything. Now we're going to start discovering what attracted you to VetCoin. You know, how the idea or how it came out. You know, what attracted you.
So this is one of the great ironies, because I was I was not a believer of cryptocurrency prior to this project launching. I was a huge fan of service and a big fan of, and I still am a big fan of nonprofit work. And I was at a place in my life for the last year or two where I was searching for an opportunity to give back. I felt like I had been relatively successful in my career. I felt like I had some experience and strength that I could share with people that could benefit from it, and searching here and there for an organization that I thought would match well with what I thought I could bring to the table. And coincidentally, and I've told this story before about how VetCoin became a thing. We were standing around talking about how VetCoin is doing and finding out that it doesn't really exist. So when Aaron and Joey and I were talking about creating an organization specifically to give back to veterans and other veteran-oriented nonprofits, it was like, well, this is obviously something I want to be involved in. Purely from what's now the VetCoin Foundation side, because I was still very skeptical, because I was ignorant. I didn't know anything about VetCoin or Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other blockchain or crypto projects. So largely because I didn't know anything, I was like, nah, it can't be real, right? and the more I thought about it, the more I considered like, well, I'm probably not that unique in my ignorance. I'm probably not that unique in my skepticism. And I'm definitely not that unique in the need to be better informed and better educated. So I was like, well, let me give it a shot and let me see what I can learn, and let me figure out some answers to these questions that I hadn't taken time to ask about what blockchain is, what cryptocurrency is. So I started to dig into it a bit, did some research, did some reading, lots of internet searches, trying to figure this out. And the more I read about it, the more I thought, gosh, this actually does make sense. So by becoming educated, I became more comfortable with the concept of using cryptocurrency for a nonprofit venture. But the original idea, the original concept of giving back to the veteran community was what attracted me to VetCoin, and the quality of the people that I was going to be working with. When you talk about Dr. Bazin and you talk about Joe Schmerdla, and now you and Harry and Ahmad and Elmer and Miggy and Teresa and Brian and Raph, like we're just all like, I'm surrounded with expertise and quality individuals. So like, of course we're going to be successful. How could we not be successful? We have all these high achieving people that I've surrounded myself with now at VetCoin. I'm like, I just need to bring in all the really good, smart, energetic people, and then they'll just carry me along with them. I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was all about, what can I do to give back to the community?
So going to that, actually a great segue. What do you think is so important about commission? What are we trying to, what's our gap, right? Why? Because, people say, so why are you so different than any other foundation? So
Well,
if somebody asks you that,
yeah,
what you could tell the audience about?
gosh,
I know.
I'm going to take a couple of sips of coffee while I think about how I'm going to answer that.
No pressure,
So,
Russ. No pressure.
okay. Why VetCoin, right? What makes VetCoin unique or different? So there's a couple simple answers to that question, and then there's probably the more intrinsic and complex answer to the question. I'll try to talk about both. So the simple answer to that question is VetCoin is the first nonprofit crypto project that we're aware of. So we haven't been able to find any other 501c3 out there that's using cryptocurrency or blockchain technology as the backbone of our nonprofit effort. So that's one thing that makes us a bit unique. Hopefully we're not the only, and we won't be the last. And hopefully people figure it out better than we did, because it's been a challenge. But as far as like energizing the crypto space to give back to veterans, I don't know that anybody else is doing that. I think there are other crypto projects out there that leverage the crypto environment as a way to give monetarily assets to nonprofits, but we created a nonprofit to take a cryptocurrency project and use that project to give back to veterans. So I think that makes us a little bit different. one of the big reasons why we sought to do this was because this is essentially access to capital that can help veterans in need. So that's a very simple way of saying that there's a monetary value in the crypto space. And if we can leverage that to give to veterans beyond just a standard monetary donation that people can make, but then we can build something that automatically does that out of the crypto environment. That's why we don't make profit off of transactions using VetCoin. It all goes into a separate wallet for donation to other organizations. Like, we created a system that's going to empower veterans by giving them access to something that I don't know much about, like myself. So, and this is the complex intrinsic part that I was talking about earlier. So there's the education piece to help bring veterans into a space where they don't know anything about, like myself. There's the access piece where we provide a venue to bring veterans into the crypto space, and we call that the Vetiverse. So it's kind of an entry point that's very veteran friendly, veteran friendly language, veteran friendly approaches, veteran friendly capabilities. And the appearance is very comfortable to folks, we believe, that have spent time in the military. And then there's the transformation piece, where we have this project that we've created that automatically turns effort into affluence, in the sense that that transaction fee piece that goes into a wallet for nonprofits. So it was the access to capital piece that was very interesting, that we can get veterans to leverage that space to improve their lives and improve the capabilities of other nonprofits.
I think for me the simple decision, what attracted me also was in most of these nonprofits and everything, right? You got the board and everything, and you don't know who they are, right? You could see us. You know what I'm saying? You could see our
Yep.
bio. You can find us.
Yep.
You know, we're putting ourselves out there, and that's one thing that is very valid for me, because you, in my view, my reputation is everything, right? So our reputation, like you say, quality individuals that are willing to put their reputation on the line to do something good for good, right?
Right. And that was a very deliberate decision. Like, when I mean, gosh. So, spoiler alert. Actually, this won't be a spoiler alert because this will come out after the dispatch goes out tomorrow. So I can talk about the content of the dispatch, and everyone will have read it before they see the video.
Yeah.
So we launched our first website on the 4th of July last year. So we haven't even, like, we're just now hitting about 12 months where we've just been trying to push out to people that we exist. So when you think about why we would put our names and our faces on this project, and it was simply because even 12 months ago, the statistics were showing that about 80% of all cryptocurrency projects were either an outright scam, or they're just poorly managed to the point that they looked like a scam, or they end up tanking because they just didn't have everything together right. So there was a couple of things that we decided early on. One was, let's not go too fast. Let's make sure that we're doing it right. And the second piece was, let's identify who we are, so we can overcome some of those unknown challenges, which is like, well, who are these VetCoin guys? Is it just some company that in another country that's trying to exploit veterans and take their money from them? No, it's 11 dudes, 9 of us are military veterans, or 8 of us are military veterans, an ambassador, right? A guy that's put his credibility for his business on the line, in the Philippines with Elmer. Like, we're out there, right? If this project fails, it's Russ, right? It's Alex. It's all the co-founders that we made a mistake. Like, we have to take ownership of this.
I agree. And actually, what I like the most is also our livelihood is not tied to Bitcoin either. So you know what I'm saying? So we don't depend on Bitcoin for our livelihood,
Right.
which is what I like.
So people think I'm like, every time I say this, it sounds so bizarre, but I continue to say it. Right. So I'm not going to get rich off of VetCoin. Right.
Correct.
I'm not going to see any money Like VetCoin can get used one time in its entire existence, or it can be used 1,000,000 times, or it can be used 1 billion times, and I'll never see a penny of transaction fees coming into my wallet. So we're not motivated to make money. We're motivated to be successful and create a better environment for veterans. So as long as that environment works, then it's a win.
Great. So we covered that. You know, have since you've been the person who has interviewed everybody else, right? Which is kind of unique if you think about it, because you got to sit like we are right now and talk about people's, and sometimes you don't know stuff that you don't know. Uh, what did you learn? Something unexpected from our Bitcoin co members and
Yeah.
colleagues
Oh my gosh.
that you saw like, damn, I didn't realize this or whatever. You don't have to say a name, but or whatever, however you want to, you know.
So there's lots of things that I've learned. And if somebody has interest in watching all the videos and the time to put into watching all the videos, you'll hear me say things like how common some of our experiences are, even though we didn't know each other when they happened. Like we all have formative events along our career um, that are similar but yet different. So, for example, like I've like Teresa and I talked about impactful female leaders in our military career that challenged us and helped us to make our careers better. And those were independent events, but very, very similar. And talking to, to Raf, and he talks about being on a mission when he shares a story about when he was giving Overwatch through the AC-130 gunship, and his commander was riding with him, but it was his flight, so he got to make some decisions during the flight that the commander probably wouldn't have approved if the commander was in a position to tell him anything. But by virtue of that, you start to see how, and this is my own processing and interpretation, is people that do the right thing when it's the right thing to do, even if it's not popular, even if it's not considered appropriate, it's still always the right thing to do. And I thought that was really impactful. But gosh, like it's going to sound like, oh, there's nothing really super that stands out, or oh, everybody's unique and special and different. But there's just so many commonalities. Like when Brian was talking about the troops that he helped out, the young Marines that he helped out during his career, like I instantly start relating to everybody, and you and I, we talked about your time working out of an embassy, and I had some time working out of an embassy, and I could see and understand what you were saying. So the really, really interesting thing to me is that after talking to particularly on the veteran side, Maggie and Elmer was a little bit different because we don't have the same shared experiences, but still connections are there if you take the time. So that's probably it. Like now that I've talked through all these things and I've had time to actually think of a cogent answer, the really cool thing about this is how we all have experiences in our lives that allow us to make a connection with each other. You just have to take time and put a little bit of work into finding what those are, and then you'll see how much more we have in common with each other than we have that's different.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So we got two more questions, and one just came out out of our discussion, which I thought it was like wow, and I'll leave that one. No, let me bring that one up, and then we close out with Bitcoin again. So you repeatedly earlier in our conversation, you talk about what is success for you, right? And how you're motivated and dedicated to success. Please tell our audience what is Russ Townsend's success.
Gosh.
Because I think you're very successful, in our way, and I think all of that. But it looks like that yet you're not. satisfied, right? Which is
Yep.
okay. We are, we
Yep.
are, we all are. I mean, if you ask me, I still have multiple things that I want to achieve.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in a way where what is success?
Oh gosh.
When you're looking at.
So that is such a multifaceted answer. And it's interesting you asked me this question because I actually reflect on this quite a bit. Because there are times in my life, like with my military career, over 30 years in the Army, um, people ask me like, when are you going to retire? Why are you still in the Army? And I tell people it's because I think I have more to contribute. And when I get to the point where I feel like I don't have any more to contribute, or when
You're not enjoying it anymore.
if and when I realize that I'm not gaining any personal value out of it, or if
Yeah.
it's just changed to the point where I'm the dinosaur and I should just go write the history books now because I'm not bringing anything current to the effort, which happens, right? Technology changes, skill sets change,
Yeah.
and your ability to adapt to that over time, you get to a point where you're just done. But I'll tell you, success for me has always been continuing to move towards the next thing. So earlier in the conversation, when I was kind of talking about I may be older and I may be slower and I may not be as strong as I used to be, my determination to get to the end hasn't changed. And it's always what's next. So you set a goal, you achieve it, what's next? You set a goal, you achieve it, what's next? And hopefully that's bringing you towards some sort of achievement where you'll be like, all right, this is what I wanted. And you'll self-actualize to the extent that you'll be done and you'll decide that I've accomplished everything that I set out to accomplish. And now what, right? That's the big unknown is now what. So for me, like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I just know that there has to be something. So,
Awesome.
so
Oh, that's
which
fair.
is really weird, right?
That's fair. I get it. I get it.
So VetCoin. So there was
So
my
in a
career
way, it is
for a while.
progress, continued progress,
Yeah,
and
I mean, when I started working for the firm that I've been employed with since 2004, I had an idea of what I wanted to accomplish, and I accomplished most of those things, and I'm content with where I'm at with my firm. So I'm not as like goal oriented on that side. And then I had family, priorities and things that I wanted to achieve there. And now that my daughter is getting ready to go into college, a lot of what I wanted to happen as a family unit has happened. So I can move on to the next phase of that. My military career is, I've been lucky enough for that to progress. So I'm pretty sure I'm about to achieve a terminal grade. So I don't think I'm going to get promoted again. So I'll do a few years at the next rank, and that will probably be enough. And then VetCoin. So how do we know when VetCoin is done? Well, that's the beauty of nonprofit work, right? So unless our mission ceases to exist, then we won't be finished, which is the beauty of an organization like this one, is that there's always something else to do. And I've talked about it before in other videos, but we have this concept in the infantry. It's called improving the foxhole. So no matter what you have going on, if you have time to do nothing, then you have time to make an improvement in something. So you can always dig your foxhole a little bit deeper. You can always improve the camouflage on the front. You can always improve the overhead cover to make it safer to be in. You can, dig out a place to sit down and rest. You can, like, you never stop making improvements no matter what you're working on.
Well, it's been great. Lastly, our last questions, and it's been a superb conversation. I have enjoyed it. Seriously, pretty cool. It came out very
You have a
well.
much better background than when we had our first conversation, by the way. When you're in that hotel on Herbert.
Yeah, I know. I know. Just please tell our audience, finalizing, please tell our audience, why should they support Bitcoin, its mission? Why? I think you covered a little bit, but let's close out again and say why they support us.
So I may have mentioned this when I was interviewing Elmer on the previous episode, but it's never the wrong time to support veterans. So why VetCoin? Why now? Why not VetCoin? And why not now? Like, what are you waiting for? Like, if you want to give back to veterans, find an organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be VetCoin. But if you're interested in the crypto space, whether it's learning more about it or enabling veterans through its use, then VetCoin is the answer right now. There's no other organization doing what we're doing. So if you want to leverage blockchain technology, you want to leverage a crypto space, you want to leverage Web 3.0, VetCoin is the way to do that. If you just want to help veterans, there's hundreds of organizations out there. Find the one that works for you and go support that one. But it's never the wrong time to support veterans.
And with that, we thank Mr. Russ Townsend for taking the time to do finalize our series. And it's been great, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's been great.
So the downside to doing 10 interviews and then being the 11th as an interviewee is I have so much to say now after talking to everybody that it takes us almost an hour to do it.
No, but I thought it was very well. It went fast. So
I have a lot to say.
Yeah, no, actually, I think it was very entertaining, very interesting to see your perspective and your background and everything. And we'll see each other soon.
All right.
So
Thanks,
thank
Alex.
you very much, Ross.